This week on Business First Africa, we zone in on Namibia, getting some opinions with regards to the management of the recently discovered oil, particularly when it comes to the investment rules. Then we also show you some developments with regards to the NIPDB as they give us an interesting framework with regards to investment. In fact, quite particularly a guidebook. And also, Namibia's budget was tabled by Finance Minister Erika Shafuda, and we had a post-budget discussion with Helena Mboti, Standard Bank economist, and Nangula Uaandja, former CEO of NIPDB and current executive director of Emeraldsand platforms. My name is Ashwin Berry, and this is Business First Africa. Brave and Building is the name of the segment as we focus on the land of the brave. And we start with some comments during the 6th anniversary of the 29ers discussions on the road for Namibia in Windhoek, where economist Robin Shelbourne said the planned NEPA is more about government control than encouraging private sector.
It doesn't encourage, it's a regulator. It shouldn't be called the NEPA. It should be called the Namibia Investment Regulation Authority, or Act, because it's all about government control of private sector investment. It's not about incentivising it. We've gone completely down the wrong road there. And I'm very sorry to say that, but it's absolutely key. Okay, my 5th point, Dean, I'm getting to the end of it, don't worry. Oil and gas, everyone will think we're going to be billionaires tomorrow. Oil and gas, well, look across the continent. Oil and gas hasn't been an unalloyed blessing to many of the people in this beautiful continent of ours, right? In fact, it's been a curse a lot of the time. Now, oil and gas, it has the potential. One single investment in in TotalEnergies investment, Venus offshore, ultra-deep water offshore oil and gas field, Venus, is going to cost them $15 billion. $15 billion. That's bigger than our entire economy. Yeah, it's huge. Do we want this investment or not? If we want it, we need to put the rules and regulations in place that encourages Total to come and invest in this venture. There are other ventures too, Rhino, Mapani Field, you name it, but these are huge amounts of money. And my sense is we've now wasted this discovery was made at the beginning of 2022, yeah? And every year, I attend the oil and gas conference here, and every year, everyone says, oh, the FID, the final investment decision, is going to be next year. So I remember at 23, we were talking about 24. In 24, we were talking about 25. 25 last year, we were talking about 26. It's been pushed back and back and back. And we're also now undertaking another institutional reorganization of oil and gas and a review of all our oil and gas regulations, from the fiscal stabilization agreements to the local content policy, which.
Now, the Namibia Investment Promotion and Development Board launched the Namibia Investment Guide in Windhoek, highlighting 7 key volumes aimed at guiding investors. Acting CEO Jessica Hawanga said Volume 7 provides an overview of Namibia's policy and regulatory frameworks governing access to land for investment, clarifying step-by-step processes, key requirements and technical terms for projects across priority sectors.
A comprehensive overview of Namibia's policy and regulatory frameworks governing access to land for investment. It is aimed to clarify step-by-step processes and key requirements for investors seeking land for projects across priority sectors, and to clearly define all technical terms related to the land matters. We acknowledge ENS Namibia for taking on this complex subject matters. Loud round of applause, please. Investment landscape is constantly changing, and to retain investment and our competitiveness, it is imperative for Namibia to remain agile in responding to these winds of change. The Namibia Investment Guide is therefore not cast in stone and will remain a living set of
Now, in this final section of the show, I sat down just after the national budget was tabled by Finance Minister Erika Shafuda with Helena Mboti, who is the Standard Bank Group economist, as well as Nangula Uaandja, who is the executive director of Emeraldsand platforms, for them to give us their thoughts and reflections with regards to the budget, as well as what they felt may have been missing. Just go through some of the summary points with regards to this budget. So the theme was anchored on people, productivity and prudence. Revenue projected at 89.8 billion. Total expenditure set at 105.9 billion Namibian dollars. Budget deficit projected at 5.5% of GDP. Financing requirement peaks at 19.2 billion. Public debt stands at 174.5 billion Namibian dollars, or 65.2% of GDP. Worth keeping that in mind. Debt projected to reach 217.3 billion by 2028-29. Interest payments to consume 16.2 billion Namibian dollars. Interest costs equal 18.1% of revenue. GDP growth revised to 2.9% for 2025. Economic growth projected at 3.1% in 2026. And here's another big one. Social sector receives 54.3 billion allocation. Education, innovation, arts and culture allocated 28 billion. And health and social services allocated 13.1 billion. So like I said, that was a summary from a presenter's perspective. Now we need the real summary from the economist. What are your thoughts post the tabling of this budget?
I think my initial thoughts on the budget are that it's definitely a good budget. The minister has acknowledged that revenue might fall short a little bit, or there's some revenue challenges, acknowledging the SECO revenue is expected to go lower, acknowledging the diamond revenue is also expected to be weaker. But I think some of the expenditure choices that she made were very specific and timely to social needs. For example, the $259 million allocation for more health professionals speaks to the policy implementation that they want to make with the CMAs. I also noticed a specific 2.8 million allocation for free tertiary education, which again is a specific targeted allocation, which is what market economists want to see. We want to see that in a tight fiscal budget, you're making strategic and smart investments, if I can put it like that. And it's also interesting to see that she sort of said that fiscal prudence will become the norm, or is the norm, because we have been having some very prudent budgets over the last few fiscal years. And to me, I think that speaks to when you look at the ratio. So she's expecting, of course, given the heightened expenditure needs, she is expecting financing requirement and debt to GDP to peak a little bit in this fiscal year, but it's expected to come down over the medium-term expenditure framework. So I think if efficiency and GDP metrics come through as she's expected, then I do think that she has made some good choices to allow us to invest in our economy, but also keep the fiscal position sound.
SOEs, what are your thoughts with regards to their contribution?
I think it's a good contribution. I think it's also nice to see. So there has been this narrative in Namibia that SOEs are not productive and that they don't contribute to the economy, and that government sort of has to spend more on them than they give. So it's interesting when she mentioned, what's interesting to me is when she mentioned that a portion of the money that's going specifically to youth development actually came from SOEs.
Right.
So I think that speaks to the fact that the government has been working on improving efficiencies across the government, and it seems as if that is also coming back into our economy, and we're starting to see the return on that investment that they made in previous fiscal years.
All right, so consolidation is the theme of the day. Any expansion that you can foresee as we move?
I mean, within the consolidation, as I said, she made some targeted expenditure choices that will allow expansion, right? So she still is investing in infrastructure. They're still investing in expanding the health sector, as I mentioned, expanding the education sector. So I think that this budget is the balanced budget that the market was looking for. It's not too expansionary, if I can put it like that. I mean, she mentioned, as I said, it's definitely prudent, but it spends enough money to make enough money later on.
Enough money. So no one's biting off more than they can chew.
I don't think so at this stage.
You don't believe so?
Yeah.
Any potential negatives? Any alarm bells ring?
I think it's just the rate at which the financing requirement is going to increase and decrease, right? So if you're looking at a total financing requirement increasing to about 5.5% in the current fiscal year, and it's supposed to decrease all the way down to 3.8% in the next 2 years by fiscal year 28-29, that requires a lot of efficiencies, right? So there's no room for error in that space. So if expenditure subsequently increases unexpectedly, then of course that will deter her plan. So it's a very ambitious budget, and it requires efficient execution. But it is I think it's, as I said, a very balanced budget.
And as we may have anticipated, not much expected with regards to oil at this point in time. We're still in the exploration stage, but you can see some projections which are expecting, that income to be coming through. Government debt, how well is it managed within this budget?
So the government debt to GDP is expected to remain around 67.5. We're at around 66%. So it seems contained, but again, expenditure still remains higher than your revenue. So obviously, if you spend more than you make, you have to borrow from somewhere. And again, I think the debt to GDP ratio is going to determine, or the direction of the debt to GDP ratio is going to be dependent on the total financing, right? The requirement. So if they manage to bring their total financing requirement down, then they will be able to achieve their keeping debt to GDP under 70%. But again, debt to GDP is a ratio. And the numerator also plays into, or the denominator actually also plays into there. So
explain that in layman's terms for the audience.
So the debt to GDP is your debt divided by your GDP, right? So of course the debt is important, but if your GDP underperforms, or if that number is lower, then you will see that ratio from a statistical perspective will increase. So even if expenditure and etc. remains as planned, if we are in a situation where your GDP does not materialize, and the minister has announced that GDP projections were lowered, so they were at about 3.3. We're looking at about 3.1%.
Yes, 3.1.
And if that lowers further, then we will see that ratio will, just statistically speaking, I mean the maths of it, it will go up.
All right, okay. Nangula, any initial thoughts before we get into your area of expertise?
So, thank you very much. So I want to agree with Mboti here that it's actually a good budget. And I like the three areas: people, productivity, prudence. So it tells you the balance with which you expect, because here it's a social budget. We need to continue making an investment in the social sectors. But at the same time, productivity, and when you come from the private sector, productivity is the buzzword. So we need to be productive. As a country, we need to increase our productivity, and we need to be deliberate about it. And then, of course, prudence. Yes, you have only got so much, and you can only afford to spend so much. As much as we would like almost like an open budget and just,
just go crazy.
You cannot afford to do that. And therefore, that exercising that prudence. So I think one of the papers yesterday wondered what is in that purse. So I think what you can say, on average, the purse looks good. Of course, there is always a few things that you can look, but maybe the positive side, of course, is that one. And then there's a transparency side. Transparency on reporting back on what has been delivered on last year's budget. So I think that one covered quite a bit of pages, and that is something which is good. I like the responsibility that is being shifted to SOEs to look after some of the development programs, because that is exactly why government establishes state-owned enterprises. They should be there, especially in a place where the private sector cannot play in that space, because you are either building up, or it requires significant capital investment, or the return is a little bit late, and therefore we need SOEs to take that space. So that being mentioned in the budget, to me, it was very something that was very, very positive. The policy certainty is welcome, but then the other things that one look at is, for example, under agriculture, I don't think if I heard the word Nekato. I need to hear the word Nekato. Namibia has spent quite a lot of amount on that dam a few years ago. And then, of course, God gave us a surprise by filling it in 1 year. It is still lying idle for many years. I need to hear more on that one, and maybe deliberate. And maybe it is said somewhere else, but I think that accountability, and especially when you come now on the private sector, where are the public-private partnerships to get Nekatal off the ground tomorrow? I think that is something that I'm missing.
Just staying with agriculture, just before we went on the broadcast, we were talking about what the agriculture sector is saying they need in order to combat foot and mouth disease. And they said they need 1.6 billion. They currently have 55 million. 1.8 billion was tabled for agriculture.
Yeah.
So is it time to knock on private sector doors, because it's unavoidable, so to speak? We see foot-and-mouth disease ravaging South Africa. The farmers in Cape Town, the resolutions we don't know if they will even be effective. But currently, it's a really huge economic hurdle in South Africa. And things that happen in South Africa tend to trickle down here occasionally.
Yes.
A little panic from the
They
agriculture
say
sector?
when South Africa sneezes, Namibia catches a
Catches a
cold.
cold.
So that is one thing to consider there. But I think, and to me, it's not about agriculture, it's on all the areas. It's about engaging, making Namibia's economic challenges a common challenge for the public and the private sector. So, and every time when you listen to the government budget, it's a budget about how much we spend, how much you get income, but how are we driving that as a coming into the private sector? That is the space I'm always missing of the challenges of saying, why are we not talking about this from a sectoral need? And even when you look at agriculture, and you look at the feedback that is given, it's about government projects and what government is doing. What about what is happening in the agricultural sector of Namibia? So I know this is a budget of government spending, but where is then the platform that is again at parliament level of saying this is the common. So I will normally expect to say, okay, let's look at economic sectors and say, from an economic sector point of view, we are not putting dollar data in the budget. However, here are the initiatives that we have to drive the economy, which probably I'm taking you a bit away from the agriculture, but which takes me to SACCO. Our dependency on SACCO receipt, our dependence on diamond receipt, and we see those are going down. What are we going to do to replace that revenue when it's not here? Where is that plan that we have to replace that revenue? And that plan has to be done in collaboration with the private sector. So that plan of saying, yes, today we've got this one. If something happens today in private sector, we call it scenario planning and so on. This is what can go, and this is our plan as a nation to address that. So I think what I'm saying is government inviting the private sector more to the table and say, you have a role to play, challenge, but collaborate and say, what can you do? These are the challenges that we have as a nation. What are you doing to help us there? So we need that to be coming through a little bit as a section, because in the end, future income, that is where it's going to come. So
it also feels like a budget that's a call to action. Huh? All hands on deck. It's time to build Namibia now. The people will produce if they're prudent. So to speak. Now, you're also saying, we're talking about certain minerals starting to dwindle. And the last thing we want to do is to make a panicked decision. Now, our neighbors in Botswana, we were talking about this before we went up, they didn't manage to reach a quorum in parliament, so their finance bill wasn't tabled yet. It was supposed to be this week. But their finance minister already spoke about, the minerals minister, she's Miss Bogolo, she spoke about 1 billion pula going just to keep diamonds alive. Now, I don't like to make a comparative analysis where we're saying we're better off, but that sounds like the kind of panic we're trying to avoid.
That in the long run. And we are doing well because our economy is diversified. That is something that is good for us. And even in the mineral space, our economy is diversified because, yes, we have got significant revenue from diamonds. But we've got uranium that is coming through. We've got gold that when the diamonds were struggling, gold came through. So having that minerals diversity has helped us as a nation. Of course, what you do not want is when you've got that storm of diamonds, uranium, everybody, you don't want, but you need to plan for that scenario. But the economists here, hopefully it will not happen, and we pray that it doesn't happen, but you kind of need. And I'm sure the ministry is probably crunching the figures there in the back room somewhere. But for us, we would like to just got a sneak peek
Now
of what is
that you
happening
mentioned
there.
that, you remind me of the 7 priority areas of the
Yeah.
president.
Yeah.
One of them is the creative sector. It seems to have been lost in translation. All right, there is education, innovation, arts and culture were allocated 28 billion of this 2.8 billion for subsidized tertiary education. There was detail there. But with the creative sector,
That's a very good point,
Yes.
because I looked at that area also. The president has 7. The good news is at least about 5 of the 7 were touched on.
Yeah.
So there was specific mention about what did we do last year with regard to the youth, and they got the National Youth Fund. What did we do in education? What happened to health? What happened to housing and sanitation? So we have heard something. The 2 that we did not hear a lot about is sport and creative. And those are the ones really, I think they are at the heart of the president from what we have been hearing her saying. I'm not so sure if I saw a specific commitment now saying, okay, it looks like we don't have a lot to report on those 2 in the previous year, but what are the commitments in 28 billion, excellent. But of that 28 billion, what are we doing? And yes, I'm sorry, I'm being a little bit selfish, but that is, the creative is my,
your section,
is my
yes.
sector,
Yes.
is my industry, is the one I'm passionate about, is the one that I want to drive. So sorry if I'm being a little bit
No, totally fine.
selfish here,
And the part of the-
but I definitely am missing
yes,
something there.
and you know, I can totally, without a doubt, relate to that. And we were at the creative symposium hosted by the Bank of Namibia. A lot of promises were made. We do see that, yes, there's a broad bank account. There's money that's come in, but we're not very sure. And creatives do want to be sure, because they were talking things about specific infrastructure, subsidizing where necessary, making it easier for them to do business. But I also have a feeling, Nangula, that part of the reason you place so much importance on the creative sector is that they are a huge gateway to investors. What do you feel this budget makes investors feel with regards to investing in Namibia?
Yeah, so with regard to investing in Namibia, the good news is the policy certainty, because that is the first thing that investors want. When you do not have the certainty, capital flies.
Yeah.
So the mention of that, even if it's just a mention of a commitment, because what gets talked about gets done. So that is important. Of course, we have seen quite a number of bills that were listed there. I think the challenge is some of them we have been hearing about them for a long time, and there was not really a specific commitment. There's some of them that say mid-August, half year and so on, but especially on the investment bill, I know we talked about the consultations, but I'm not so sure if we have seen a commitment there. The other one that caught me a little bit off guard is the NEP bill, the NEP, so the Namibia Economic Empowerment, Equitable Economic Empowerment. It has been quiet for I don't know how long, and then today it was mentioned, and I think there's a consultation on Monday. I don't know how many of the private sector were aware of it, but that one was a little bit of saying, okay,
This is still here.
so do we have it on our calendars for the consultation? Because it's an important one. It's critical. And why it is critical? It's critical because that is where you have got, maybe you can call it competing priorities, but they don't need to compete. Because that bill, as far as I'm concerned, it is necessary. We have got the second most unequal economy in the world.
Yes.
And we have got high level of youth unemployment. We are talking about people that have got degrees, but they don't have skills. We need to invest in skills. We are looking at various SMEs that are not breaking through in the value chain. We need to talk about procurement from SME. So to me, that bill, when you look at that, so I know people contest about the ownership pillar, and there is place for that one. But for me, the other areas of procurement, skills development, and innovation, that is critical. So we need that bill, and we need the sentence. But again, if you are an investor, in my career for the past 5 years, I have not met most of international investors that say no to that bill. They support it because wherever they operate, they have got that bill. The only thing they want to hear is what are the rules of the game.
Yes.
We need to know so that when we make our plans to come to Namibia, we know it is included. So I have not met international investors that are saying no to the principles of the bill. They want the bill, they know they've got an obligation, and it is good if that obligation is clearly set out, but timely consultation and input is critical. Making sure that you get the people involved and that you reach your objectives of saying, where are we today with whatever we are measuring? Where will we be? I think that is critical.
All right.
So there is a lot of positive things in the bill. But again, like I said, many times it's about the devil in the details, but it's also about communication.
All right. Speaking of the devil in the details, any points from Mayor Nangula's reflections that you might want to re-emphasize?
I mean, I definitely agree with a lot of her reflections, especially the devil in the details from a youth perspective as well, right? So they've allocated some money to the youth fund. They said 50% of that is going to be direct disbursements to the youth, which could, I guess, speak to the capital that's youth like the creative industry, etc., would need. But I think a lot of times in Namibia, we have a very talented industry, but to your point about the Bond Symposium, they don't know where to access capital, right? To start their dreams and just to start that. So, of course, there's a 50% of the fund is going to be directly disbursed to the youth, but how, when, what do I need to, how do I qualify for it, where do I get this information? I think that needs to be definitely specified. But in general, I think that the intention is definitely there, and the direction is there. I think, to Nangula's point before as well, we have been seeing a lot of these intentions coming through for many, many years. And I think, as we said before the broadcast, the key is not just the policy and writing it down, it's more the execution. And I think for me also it's very interesting to see that from an execution perspective, we still have not gotten to 90% and above execution, right? So we're sitting at an operational expenditure execution in the 80s, and then the development was in the 70s. So that is still concerning. It still means that government is not as efficient as they could be. Possibly improving, but definitely not as efficient as we can be and we need to be.
All right. So that's been Business First Africa. If you're a Namibian and you are watching this, I would love to know your thoughts with regards to the budget. Do you feel it was comprehensive? Do you feel that perhaps we're playing it too safe? Would you like some more answers? Make sure you talk to us on NTV Africa. That is on Facebook, NTV Africa with a K. And do watch this show at any time on ntvafrica.my.na. And remember, it's never just business, it's life. Good night.